Once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
What's going on YouTube? Diggy546. I'm gonna keep this real straightforward. I never do an intro or anything like that, especially after losses, but even after wins too. Either way, um, this game was very close for I would say probably a quarter and a half. And then the Giants kind of stayed within striking distance, kept them kind of, within realistic striking distance until I would say the end of the third quarter. Um, the Giants had a chance at the beginning of the fourth quarter, probably all the way up until about 10 minutes left in the game to come back and win this game or to come back and make it competitive. But of course, they just couldn't get that done. Where do I start? The biggest issue today was third downs for the defense today. They could not get off the field. If I can pull this up right here, if I can see something going on third down conversions. I don't have that stat in front of me, but the 49ers had 25 first downs. They had six penalties that we made that I'm pretty sure all of our penalties gave them first downs. If not, at least four of the six gave them first downs. Um, we had a turnover at the end of the game, which was, I mean, didn't mean anything. The ball got tipped in the air at the end of Daniel Jones playing, and that just only adds to his interception total. His third interception this year that pretty much really isn't his fault, and I can tell that this is going to be a high interception year just by the way things are shaking out. Is it's going to be a year where people say, "Oh, Daniel Jones is a turnover machine. He threw a million interceptions, and three so far out of the four that he's thrown have been off of receivers' hands." Again, the defense couldn't get off the field. They either gave up third and longs. I think what really iced this game was early on when Debo Samuel converted a third and 15. And then later on in that drive, Christian McCaffrey converts a third and 14. And after that, that defense was cooked. They were on the field all day. Um, our offense came out and looked really good to start the game, but they couldn't sustain it. They couldn't sustain. They looked really good to start the game off, and then they kick a field goal, and then on top of that, they get the ball back the next drive, and instead of getting right back to what they were doing, they immediately run a play action, and Daniel Jones gets sacked at the 1 yard line out of the play action because it doesn't. Nick Bosa doesn't fall for it, and it just kind of snowballed from there. It just kind of snowballed to the 49ers having a very, very long drive. The defense giving up third down conversions, mostly because not tackling, mostly because not being able to just do fundamental things out there, and then also penalties. Every single third down, it seemed like there was a penalty. The defense was on the field forever, and I'm guessing the more tired they got, the more penalties and the worse they played. I mean, that only makes sense. And then on top of that, it just kind of seemed like the offense, and I'll get to the deficiencies on the offense soon, but it just kind of seemed like the offense couldn't get into rhythm. Because if you look at the offensive possessions for the first half, they had three offensive possessions. And the first possession, like I said, was that drive where we had a nice drive and we got down there and kicked a field goal. The next possession was that sack that destroyed that drive, and we really had no chance after that sack. We were so far behind the marker. And then the third drive, we go down the field and kick another field goal. So I would say that the team did not look horrible on offense to start the game. They didn't look elite, but they also didn't look horrible. And really taking a look at it, I mean, two out of the three drives, the first half, they scored, but they only had three drives because the defense could not get off the field. So again, you're out of rhythm at that point. And then once the offense started getting the ball more, because the defense still gave up ridiculously long drives, but they started for some reason holding the offense in the red zone, even after all the penalties and conversions. They started holding the offense in the red zone, but the offense on our side just could not. They just could not for the love of them, they just couldn't get first downs. They couldn't sustain drives. I set a timer, and it was literally like 10 minutes. The defense would sit on the bench, and they would have to come back out there. And again, like I said, these two sides work off of each other. Part of the reason that I think the offense wasn't able to sustain drives is because they weren't in a rhythm. And part of the time, part of the reason that the defense wasn't able to get off the field is because I think they were tired. So let's look at time possession. 39 minutes to 20 minutes. That's double time possession. You cannot win many games like that. We didn't get that many at bats because they held the ball for so long. We got 10 first downs this entire first game. We got 29 rushing yards. Folks, I literally picked higher than 35 rushing yards for Daniel Jones to have this week. I picked higher than we didn't get what we wanted to get. 121 passing yards, 29 rushing yards, 150 total yards this game. We gave up 2 sacks, but I wouldn't say that the pass rush was the huge problem this game. Um, but there were just a couple of times that the pass rush came through, of course, on the sacks. And those 2 sacks, I think, were the most crucial sacks that the 49ers could have had. And then on top of that, the 49ers could have they just kept getting pressure at the most opportune times for him. So Daniel Jones missed a couple of throws. One particular throw towards the end of the game where maybe the game is out of reach, but also us scoring on that drive gives us some sort of life going forward. I think it gives us life. And Daniel Jones was under pressure, and he threw the ball too far, and he threw the ball a little bit too high, not a little bit too high, way too high, because Darren Waller reached up to get that ball. It hit his fingertips, and that preceded a whole discussion on Twitter. Some people think Darren Waller should have jumped for it, which I think Darren Waller could have jumped for that and caught that ball. But also, I think the optimal way for that to work was Darren Waller to be hit in stride because he's running a crosser. You want that guy to get hit to get. You want him to catch that ball in stride so he can turn up the field and run with it, and it just didn't happen. So um, that was the nail in the coffin. And I put out a tweet saying Daniel Jones just lost us that game, lost us the game by missing that throw. And I didn't literally mean Daniel Jones is the reason we lost the game. What I meant is any shot that we had it coming back and winning that game is finished after that play was made because the defense was going to get back on the field and the clock was going to get run out pretty much. So I went over some stats. I went over pretty much why I think we lost the game. Let's look at some injuries that happened today. Deontay Banks left the game. Adoree Jackson left the game. I'm not 100% sure if Deontay Banks came back in. I don't think he did. And that is crucial that Deontay Banks is healthy because he's been a solid rookie corner for us, been a solid corner in general for us, and we cannot afford to lose this dude. We just can't afford to lose him. Trey Hawkins today was absolutely pitiful as a tackler. He looked so great in the preseason. He looked so great even in the first game as a tackler. He was a sure tackler. He came up. He wasn't scared. But it just seemed like he was hesitating every time he came up to tackle somebody. And there were a couple of times he just completely whiffed. He completely whiffed. He dove for guys. He tried to come up and hit guys. And he would just lunge at people and not touch them at all, not get a hand on them. Pinnock missed tackles all over the field. Micah McFadden had a couple of really good plays that helped stop drives, but he also had a bunch of plays that he missed tackles on. Bobby Okereke missed tackles. Adoree Jackson missed tackles all over the place, and it makes you think, can this guy really play in the slot if he's going to miss as many tackles as he is? Brock Purdy, did not really throw the ball down the field that often today, and he got over 330 something yards. Over 330 something yards. So it just was one of those kind of days where guys could not come up and make tackles. Guys they just couldn't do it. And Purdy did not have to work as hard as he probably normally would have to and have to worry about throwing in a tight coverage. He just kind of threw it to almost the checkdowns, and those guys were open. They had maybe two or three guys around them, and they just couldn't tackle them. The running game for the 49ers, it was effective, but it wasn't dominant. 141 yards for them. Again, I mean, it was effective, but I wouldn't say the running game is a story. They just completely just took us to task as far as throwing the football, and we just couldn't come up and tackle these players. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing. I would have liked to see Daniel Jones run more, but I'm pretty sure when we take a look back at that tape, Fred Warner was probably shadowing Daniel Jones. And that is a guy that you cannot get the edge on. You cannot really run around because Fred Warner's he's a guy that really looks like a running back out there playing linebacker. So he's a tough guy to get around. Um, I think we'll do a better job going forward in his next couple games. Again, I talked about this game before we got into it, and I said this was going to be a very difficult game to win. The point spread was a 10.5 point spread, and I said on Twitter that that is an actual polite point spread because I could see this game happening exactly like this. And I actually think the way that the Giants played on offense and just in general, I mean, they were in the game for at least a half. I think they could have kept this closer than they did, but they just kind of fell apart at the end of the game. Um, that touchdown pass, I can call it garbage time about that Debo Samuel touchdown pass at the end of the game, and say maybe the real score was like 23-12, but either way they covered the spread, and either way, I wouldn't say that's a garbage time touchdown because it pretty much iced the game completely for the 49ers. Last couple of things I wanted to talk about before I get out of here is Trent Williams literally hauled off and punched Ashawn Robinson in the face, and he was not ejected from the game. I'm not going to go too far about that because I think they still win the game if Trent Williams isn't playing, which is even funnier to think about. But you can't punch somebody in NFL. I mean, every time I've seen somebody get punched or throw a punch, they get ejected. And that didn't happen today. And I think that's just completely unacceptable. On top of that, there were a couple of calls that I would say are ticky tack calls at best. But again, to give credit, most of these calls were legit calls, just us making horrible mistakes on third down. And the last thing I'll talk about is Wink Martindale is a great defensive coordinator, and I'm not calling for his job, but a discussion needs to be had about the way that he's calling these games and about the way he's not really adjusting. Now you can say maybe he adjusted because they started shutting down those screens later on in the game, but the fact that we drafted Kayvon Thibodeau, this man right here, who's not perfect, we drafted Kayvon Thibodeau in the top 5 to be an elite pass rusher for us. And about at least half of the third downs, if not more than half of the third downs, Kayvon Thibodeau is dropping in the coverage. So that does two things. First of all, it does not stop quarterbacks from throwing behind him because he looks unfamiliar. He looks out of place in coverage. He's pushing guys down the field. He's getting illegal contact penalties. He's gotten that last year and this year. He can't cover these guys. He can't cover these guys. He cannot cover these folks, Wink. He can't cover them. So you're dropping him there. So that does one thing. You put a liability back there in coverage, who's a liability to have a penalty, and a liability to give up a catch, and a liability to not be able to open field tackle because he's not used to being back and watching a guy run up to him from a linebacker position. He's not used to that. So first of all, you put a liability out there. And then second of all, you say, I'm okay with O'Shane Ximines and Jason Pinnock being my edge rushers here. I'd rather Jason Pinnock and my 4 or 5 man rush, I'd rather Jason Pinnock and O'Shane Ximines rush the passer than Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau should be relentlessly rushing the passer every single third down. It just should be happening. I don't want to see this guy dropping into coverage half or more than half of the third downs, it is honestly getting ridiculous. So that's the last thing I had to say. This game, I mean, the better team won the game. We all knew that this was possible, that we could get stomped out like this, but we got 11 days. We got time to get a little healthy. Also, DJ Davison got hurt. Um, Wandale looked pretty good coming back, but we got 11 days to get healthy and come out and fight against the Seahawks. But this was one of those games that we knew could possibly happen this way. But our next game is prime time, so maybe next time on prime time we can show up and actually, put something good out there for people to actually talk about the next day instead of people saying, "Oh, the Giants on prime time again." What a joke they are. So this went a little bit long, but I wanted to touch everything that was in my head for now.